The tensions between India and China seem to be escalating as Beijing has ruled out any compromise with New Delhi in the military standoff in the Sikkim section. In fact, China has put the onus on New Delhi to resolve the grave situation. It's not just the Sikkim-Bhutan-India tri-junction. In fact, China and India are also engaged in a shadow boxing in the Indian Ocean region, where 13 Chinese ships have been learned to have been present and patrolling over the last 1 month. Now, in an unusually blunt shadow boxing in the Indian Ocean region, where 13 Chinese ships have been learned to have been present and patrolling over the last 1 month. Now, in an unusually blunt set of remarks, China's ambassador to India, Luo Zhaohui, said on Tuesday that the ball is in India's court and it was for the Indian government to decide what options could be on the table to resolve the present standoff. As the dragon dares India again, Defence Minister made it clear that India of today is far different from the India of 1962. The question that we are asking on Spotlight tonight is, do these border skirmishes have the potential to scale up into a more significant battle, and will this sour the Sino-Indian ties? In fact, to take that story forward, and in fact we've also opened our phone lines for callers to tell us whether it's time to tame the defiant dragon. We are also tweeting with the hashtag Defiant Dragon. To take this story forward, with me in the studio is Major General S.P. Sinha, who's in the studio, and along with that, joining me on Skype is in fact Einar Tangan, senior journalist, joining me from Beijing on Skype. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining me on this broadcast as we in fact take this story forward, wait for our callers to tell us their thoughts on it. Mr. Sinha, let me come to you first. As we talk about this border skirmishes that are happening, it's also, of course, several things that are happening simultaneously between India and China. One is the sort of shadow boxing in the Indian Ocean region. Second, of course, is the border skirmishes that are happening in that tri-junction area between Sikkim, India and Bhutan. The question I want to ask you is that as of now, given the kind of rhetoric, given the kind of strong stance that is coming in from the Chinese media, do you expect this to escalate further, given the fact that Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping are scheduled to meet at the G20 as well? Is this, ahead of that big meeting, a sort of a rhetoric in Chinese media, or do you think this could actually scale up to something more significant?
I look at it, the entire actions of China with regard to sending warships and submarines in IOR, Indian Ocean region, and also trying to escalate problem in Doklam Plateau. Firstly, China is worried because of growing proximity of India with USA. China wants to send a very strong message signal to India that going very close to USA will not be in the national interest of India, and therefore sending of warships and submarines in IOR. Second thing, you have to understand that the strategic vision of China is expansionist policy. After 1950, after annexing Tibet, China has always been eyeing Sikkim, Nepal and Bhutan. The Chumbi Valley is so narrow that military maneuvers in that narrow dagger-like territory of China is very difficult to carry it out. And there is only, in fact, on just the northern tip of Siliguri, it is just 17 kilometers wide. And therefore, China wants to extend the territory so that military maneuvers can become easier.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about this expansionist tendencies as far as China is concerned. We have a caller on the line, Dharmendra, joining us from Hyderabad. Dharmendra, go ahead, make your point.
Yeah, hello there. I would like to tell that the Chinese are the biggest land grabbers. They like to have a piece of every country that is, falling on their border. It's time we Indians put our foot down and show them the place, is what I personally think too.
Okay, all right. So Dharmendra is probably just highlighting a very popular Indian sentiment right now, which is that India should not be taking this lying down. If the Chinese, through in fact its official media and also of course through its ambassador in India, are stating the fact that Beijing will not back down, probably it's time for New Delhi to also further escalate the tensions or maybe send a message. My question to you, Mr. Sinha, really is that General Sinha, is it in fact time to now for New Delhi to not diffuse the tension maybe?
No. We have to ask China or ensure that China shows its cards. Let's not buckle down under pressure, firstly. Secondly, I would like to go back in history. 1962, we lost the battle with China. We lost the war not because of incompetence of Indian armed forces, but because it was a logistic failure. It was incompetence of Krishna Menon as the Raksha Mantri, Defense Minister of India. When army had advised that this is how China is going to proceed, D-day wise, D+1, D+2, no cognizance was taken. And in fact, Krishna Menon made a statement that because of our growing proximity and growing friendship with China, there is need to dismantle Indian army. If you have such like defense minister, what will be the outcome of this fate of this country? Firstly. Secondly, 1967 in Nathula, when Chinese attacked us, we won the battle.
Yes.
We defeated China. 1986, again there was a intrusion by China. And we had Operation Falcon, then followed by Operation Checkerboard. And we created a situation where China blinked. Here also, China is trying to test our patience and our guts and courage. That should we blink first or will China blink first? Time has come to call a spade a spade. Let's not blink. Because if we blink, then China knows how to keep pressurizing India again and again.
Fair point. Fair point. I have another caller, Mr. Sen, joining in from Kolkata. In fact, our guest from Beijing, Mr. Tangen, is also with us on Skype. Let's first get the caller, Mr. Sen from Kolkata. Go ahead, sir. Make your point.
I just wanted to know what are the preparations that India is taking for containing this Chinese threat, except for the war games that will go on from 10th of July with India, Japan and America. What other things are we doing? If it's not secret, certainly don't tell it to me, but if it's not a secret, tell me whatever you can.
General Sinha, do you want to comment on the fact that these exercises that are taking place right now, how significant are they? And of course, does it also go ahead to really send a message as far as China is concerned?
Yes. China is trying to bulldoze India. China is trying to flex its muscles. And we should not blink. And this tri-country joint Malabar exercise is a strong message to China that India is not alone in facing China. United States, Japan and India are going in for a major exercise in Bay of Bengal. 15 warships, 2 submarines, fighter jets, surveillance aircraft, Hepters, and from India's side, we have 6 to 7 warships and submarines, 4 and INS Vikramaditya, which is 44,550 kilotons equipped with MiG-29 fighters. All these are going to participate. So once we are also going to show our muscles, we are not going to be cowed down by China trying to send its warship and submarines in IOR, Indian Ocean region. Then the second aspect I would like to say that 5 advanced landing ground in Arunachal Pradesh have been activated, which were lying dormant. Fighter jets have landed. Strategic roads are under preparation. We have already constituted a new corps called 17 Corps with a total responsibility of guarding Arunachal Pradesh. So, and rest are strategical and operational details which cannot be shared at this platform.
Of course. Let's get in Group Captain Mr. Srivastav from New Delhi also on the broadcast. Sir, go ahead, make your point.
Good evening. You know, dealing with China, rhetoric doesn't work. One of our former army chiefs many years ago addressed the Chinese in a most appropriate manner, called them bandicoots. Bandicoots dig and they surface at time and place of their choosing, like they have done now at tri-junction. Let's call the Chinese bluff. I have flown fighters for last 30 odd years in that region. We have an excellent and powerful air force in the eastern sector. Chinese do not have anything in that region, and the Chinese air force in the Tibet Autonomous Region can do very little. And I am making this point as a professional. So let's call the Chinese bluff, and if they move on, let's move on from the age of a stapled visa and all these irritants that keep happening on a day-to-day basis. They call Arunachal Pradesh, Southern Tibet, and all kinds of things. So if the things come to a head, they call Arunachal Pradesh, Southern Tibet, and all kinds of things. So if the things come to a head, let's strike them. And that's the only way. I'm not a warmonger, but you know, there is a very famous Chanakya saying, when the deterrence fails, deterrence must be unleashed. And that is what India...
Okay, you've made your point. Let me go across to our guest joining in from Beijing. Mr. Tangen, the question I want to ask you is that I'm sure a lot of people would be really looking to ask Beijing is, at the end of the day, a lot of water has flown right now. It's India of 1962 is not the India right now of 2017. You're talking about two major superpowers. Why is it that Beijing is really looking to engage with New Delhi at such a level? And why is Beijing looking to further escalate the tensions?
Well, quite frankly, you know, there's a problem on both sides in terms of perception. From the Chinese perception, they saw that the Indian army crossed the border to help Nepal. And from that point of view, they see this as an incursion. India sees itself as acting in the light, and right now, based on the conversations that have been had by your guests, it seems that they're very in favor of some sort of armed war. I don't know that that will solve anything. It's unfortunate, the fact that old men like to send young men to battle. Unfortunately, it's the young men who die.
Okay, yes, there are casualties as far as war is concerned. My producer tells me there are more callers joining us. There is Prakash from Gujarat, is what my producer tells me. Mr. Prakash, go ahead, make your point.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Actually, my point is, they forget about the weapons and all. Morally, they are dependent, the Chinese are dependent on our domestic supporters. That is communists, Naxalites, and Maoists. They are fully supporting communists. That is the biggest problem.
Okay.
First, we should crush these people.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll come to you, General Sinha, in just a second. Let me just ask Mr. Tangen one more question. That Prakash is really raising here is that at some level, India also has a certain amount of internal security issues that it needs to deal with, and China, as a hostile neighbor or as perceived to be a hostile neighbor, adds to its tensions, adds fuel to fire.
Well, that is entirely a matter of perception. China sees it quite the opposite. They see that they have been trying very hard to try to get India to join in on the Belt and Road Initiative. So I don't think it's a situation where they feel this is something that cannot be mended. The problem is China is looking for a goodwill gesture from India, showing that they're willing to talk. And the basis of that is the withdrawal of the troops from the border zone. This is not in question. Indian troops crossed the border. They're saying it's to help Nepal. But if you want to talk, then it's necessary to get back to the status quo. The road can be put on as one of the things on the table, that at this point, to be risking lives and risking economies, is this really what we want?
Important point to make as far as economy is concerned, as far as also status quo is concerned, there are two things, but we also have more callers. I'll take the callers' questions, but a very important point that needs to be made out in the broadcast is, if you really look at the bilateral trade that exists between India and China right now, statistics more or less say that the bilateral trade between India and China is close to about $60-odd billion, tilted in favor of China. $48 billion is what China imports, India exports from China. It's a minuscule 12 to 14-odd billion dollars for India. So the yes, trade deficit is skewed in favor of the Chinese. Yes, both sides need to understand why is this bilateral trade really being put to risk given the amount of skirmishes that are really being seen. But Mr. Tangen, the important point before I take the next caller is, it's not status quo right now. The Chinese state media is not talking about status quo right now. It's saying it is willing to escalate this further. It is up to New Delhi to actually decide what are the solutions on the table. Major General Sinha, I'll allow you to take the next question that is being answered, that is being raised by our next caller. Major Sharma from Punjab. Go ahead, sir. Make your point.
Good evening, ma'am. This is a point that you were just referring to, that we need to respond not only militarily, but also politically. The response politically has to be our leverage of trade against China. I dare say that China just cannot afford any breaking of ties with India as far as the finance and the trade is concerned. That's where India has never shown its willingness to take a stake. They have never mentioned it. We are only trying to answer them military or, just trying to be wishy-washy with them. We need to tell them that if you want to trade with us, we want to have financial tie with us, you have to stop this.
Okay, that's a very fair point. Major General Sinha, come in on this. Yes.
I want to ask a question to Chinese representative. Isn't it a fact that China and India signed special representative mechanism in 2012? The main aim behind signing this mechanism was that any issue, any disharmony with regard to tri-junction boundary problem will be settled mutually between India, China and affected country, in this case Bhutan. How can you start trying to talk to Bhutan? How can you enter Bhutanese territory? How can you start constructing road and breaking all the protocols without consulting each affected party? And you have no regard for international treaties, understanding right from 1865, 1910, 1988, 1999, 1988, 1999, understanding between China and Bhutan.
Okay, let him respond, yes.
Did he sign this treaty or not?
Okay, let Mr. Tangen respond.
First off, I'm not a representative of the Chinese government. Second,
there you are.
In terms of the treaty you're talking about, yes, there was supposed to be any disagreements should be taken. That does not mean that you cross the border. When Indian troops crossed the border with China to aid Nepal, that was a violation of the very treaty that you're talking about.
Okay.
If you're saying respect for international law, then I think it's very clear that this case would be against you.
Okay. I have the point or the bone of contention really, I have two more callers, my producer tells me, I'll go to them, but the bone of contention really is the fact that Chinese troops, the Chinese agencies are saying that Indian troops cross the border, whereas India's stated position is that it is not Chinese territory, it is Bhutanese territory where Chinese troops are entering. That is the crux of the entire issue that is really being debated. And of course, the issue is how far could this really escalate and spoil or sour Sino-Indian relations. Let me now go across to Ramesh from Kerala, who's joining us on phone line. Go ahead, Ramesh, make your point.
Madam, my point is that Chinese Communist Party is a group of having 35 lakh people. They are interested in trade. So if we stop the trade, they will learn a lesson. There is no need for military kind of things.
Okay.
They will learn a lesson. They are a group of 35 lakh people. Mostly they are billionaires. They will admit people who is having billionaire capacity there.
Right.
So we can teach them a lesson by breaking trade.
Okay. Okay.
We will not be affected. We have enough homegrown product is there. We will not.
I understand your question, Ramesh. I'm running out of time. Let me quickly take the question from Amit from Delhi, and then, of course, I'll throw it open to our guests.
Hi. Just want to ask the Chinese gentleman in our show that China has very clearly said that they're not going to go back. The ball is in India's court. Now, China cannot expect India to cross the whole bridge and come to them. To walk halfway, India needs to walk halfway. And if this is the case, then I would seriously want India to stand there and not move there. Let the Chinese, fire the first bullet.
Okay.
And then let things go on the way it is. Whatever happens.
Okay.
Because India cannot buckle down now. If India does buckle down now, then China will forever. India does buckle down now, then China will forever.
Okay, I've got your point. I've got your point. Major General Sinha, very quickly, running out of time. This is probably a time in history where India should not be buckling down to pressure. At the end of the day, there are a lot of things that India needs to take care of. There is also, of course, the fact that if trade is hit, China stands to lose more, given the fact it has a high trade deficit. Beyond that also, at the end of the day, you have a Chinese government which is shielding Hafiz Syed. It is a Chinese government which is also making huge inroads as far as Arunachal Pradesh is concerned. There is also the Obor issue. At some level, do you think it is now time in history for India to make a point?
Absolutely. China tries to ensure every time if something good is happening to India, it tries to put a stop to this. But with regard to this Sikkim face-off, I want to highlight very important.
Very quickly, sir, very quickly.
Geostrategic importance of this face-off is that in the present scenario, India is positioned at dominating features. China wants to reverse the stand. They want to occupy Jompiri in Doklam Plateau so that they can dominate India and Siliguri corridor.
Okay, let me get a counter voice also. Let me get in Mr. Tangin from Beijing. At the end of the day, sir, why is there such an expansionist Chinese tendency? Why is it not willing to have a peaceful coexistence with its neighbors?
Okay, just to correct one erroneous idea, I am not Chinese. I'm half Korean, but I'm an American by birth and nationality. All right, in terms of what's happening between India and China, it's quite simple. You have very, very different perceptions of what's going on. All the indignation, all the rage that you are expressing is also felt on the Chinese side because they believe that there were violations of the treaty that your previous guest referred to, that India unilaterally crossed a known border in aid of another country, Bhutan, and without opening up negotiations and discussing it.
Okay.
So please keep in mind, there are always two vantage points to look at.
Okay, that's a valid argument that you're making. Maybe there are a certain set of objections or valid arguments that are being made on the other side of the border as well, as far as the Chinese are concerned, the Chinese media is concerned. But what is really coming out as far as India is concerned, that you have the dragon that is looking to dare India again. But the bottom line really is, whether it is land, whether it is on sea, India of 2017 under Prime Minister Modi is very different from India of 1962. And more importantly, one really needs to think is, are these skirmishes just setting the a benchmark or setting the mood really for a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese Premier Xi Jinping in Hamburg? That's all the time we have at Spotlight today. Thank you so much for the guests who've joined us on this broadcast. Keep it with NewsX as news and updates will continue.